we get back into your financial literacy supplements today, I want to start with another speed test. So if you would get out your speed drill booklets, turn to page 15. Page 15 in your speed drill booklets. Looking at speed test 33 there at the bottom. Now, I will say this. We have not specifically gone over everything in that top row. We have talked about changing to equivalent fractions before, though, and I think you should be able to do the top row just fine. Certainly number 6, 7, 8, we've done all of that. Y'all should be good with those. And then 9 and 10 are what's called scale drawing problems. You talked about these in elementary school. If you went here, maybe at another school, you might not have seen it before. I think you should be able to figure it out. But here's what I'm going to do. Because this is stuff we haven't specifically taught this year, if you don't do well, I'm just going to not count your grade. Okay? So it's not going to factor into your speed test average for the quarter. If you do well, though, I want to go ahead and give that to you. You're going to have 2 minutes to give it your best shot, and then I'm going to spend some time going over it, make sure we understand it after it's over. Okay? So you're going to have 2 minutes, give it your best shot, and you may begin. Stop. All right, pencils away. Pencils off your desks, pens out, and exchange with the person behind you. Person in the back, bring yours to the front. Exchange with the person behind you. Person in the back will bring yours to the front. Some confusion on aisle 2. All right, sign your name at the bottom of the page as the grader in pen. Again, pencils should be off your desks. Sign your name as the grader in pencil, or in pen. Pencils should be off your desks. And these are 10 points each. Again, if you don't do well, no big deal. We won't count it against you. But if you do well, and I'm curious to see how we did, we'll give it to you. Number 1, the missing numerator is a 9. 8 times 3 gives 24, so we should multiply 3 times 3 to get 9. That we have done. Number 2, if you think backwards, like reducing a fraction, 25 divided by 5 gives 5. So 20 divided by 5 is going to give you the 4. So 4 in the blank for number 2. Number 3, well, you multiply the 9 by 8 in the top to get 72, so 11 by 8 in the bottom gives 88. Again, 88 for number 3. Number 4, if you work backwards, 8 times 4 gives 32, so the 9 times 4 would give a 36 in the bottom. Number 4 is 36. And number 5, if you go in the top, 7 times 7 gives 49, so 10 times 7 would give 70. 70. Again, the top row answers are 9, 4, 88, 36, and 70. Next row, number 6. Anything divided by itself equals 1. I hope you didn't take time to make it 79 eighths times 8 79ths, and then cancel to get 1. I hope you just said, hey, we're dividing something by itself. That equals 1. Doesn't matter if you did. I mean, as long as you got the 1, you still get the points, but you know. And then number 7. Anything times 1 equals itself. So obviously the answer on number 7 is 2 9/10. And for number 8, what does that fraction bar mean, class? Divide. So you've got something divided by itself again. And anything divided by itself equals 1. Now you could write it as 13/20 times 20/13 when you multiply by the reciprocal, but you shouldn't have to. You should get an easy 1 there. So 6, 7, and 8 are almost there to mess with you. Now, number 9, the scale drawing. Here's how we could think of it. 1/4 of an inch is a certain ratio compared to 50 miles. But we don't want to represent 50 miles. We want to represent 500 miles. What do I have to do to a 50 to make it a 500, class? Times 10. So if I multiply 1/4 times 10, I'm going to get 10/4. Well, 10/4 becomes 2 2/4, or 2 1/2 inches. You didn't have to do it this way necessarily, but basically you'd be thinking the same line of thought. To go from 50 to 500 is times 10. 1/4 times 10 is 2 1/2 inches. Did anyone have, the paper you're grading, 2 1/2 inches? Wow, a few of you did. The rest of you, does it kind of make sense now? To go from a 50 to a 500 times 10. Okay, so what do I have to do to the 1/4 inch? Times 10. So look at number 10. I go from a single little tiny millimeter, equaling something, to 59 millimeters. Well, class, how do I go from 1 to a 59?
59.
Times 59. So if the 1 millimeter is 10 kilometers, then 59 millimeters, multiply the 10 by 59, class, we would get 590 kilometers. How many of you, the paper you're grading, had 590? Okay, several more of you got that one that time. Does it make sense now, even if we didn't get it before? All right, I'll take some questions here in just a moment. For now, 10 points each. Put the score in the score blank and return to the owner. For now, put the score, and put the score, on the score page. Again, I will slash it out if it is not a good grade, but put it in the score blank next to where it says speed drill 33, speed drill 33. Put in the score blank next to where it says speed drill 33. Again, if it's a lot lower than your other grades, if it's even a little bit lower than what most of your other grades are, I'll scratch it out. But I am curious as we pass these back to their rightful owners. There we go. I am curious, were there any hundreds on the speed drill? Were there any hundreds? How about 90s? You only missed one thing. Well, that's really good. All right, now let me take questions. Let me ask, are there any questions? Say, can you show, you talked through them, but can you show one of these? Yes, sir.
So, I think the only thing I messed up on is so for number 4, we multiplied the 8 times 4, but in the 9 times 4
also, right. So whatever we do to the top, and we're kind of thinking this direction all of a sudden, which is weird. We're used to going this way. But if you think in reverse, 8 times 4 gives 32, so we have to do the same thing in the bottom, times 4, and that's where that 36 comes in.
I multiplied it by 3.
All right, good. Any other questions, comments on speed test 33? All right, going past those 4, if you would, please. And take out your financial literacy supplements. Turn to page 2, financial literacy supplements. Turn to page 2. And while you're getting those out, while you're turning, let's go ahead and review some terms from yesterday. The main emphasis yesterday, and it will be today as well, is this idea of making money. And money that you make, class, is called income. Money that you make, money that you earn, class, is called income. Now, with income, I said there's a few different ways you could make money. We said one way people make money is if they're serving others and other people just give them whatever money they feel like out of the goodness of their hearts. A waitress, a waiter, a barista, a stylist, people who are in service occupations, they collect tips. I was pointing to him. Pay attention, please. Oh, yes, tips. They collect tips. Now, in addition to tips, they get paid a certain amount per hour. Whenever you get paid a certain amount of money per hour, that's referred to as, Kirsten, wages. Class, a certain amount of pay per hour is called wages. Now, does it have to be the same amount for everybody? No. Really low entry-level jobs are paid a lot less, and it varies by state as well. right? So you're working at McDonald's. Right now, there's a McDonald's down the street advertising. They're paying $9.25 an hour. That's higher than minimum wage, but they need people to work. There's a shortage of workers, so they're willing to pay a little bit extra. You go to places like Seattle, they've got a $15 an hour minimum wage. And so they pay a little bit more. It also costs a lot more to live there as a result. But anyway, different places. You start certain jobs that are a little bit higher tier, you get paid more. Maybe as a construction worker. If your job one day is you put the cones out along the street, that's all you do, probably don't get paid much per hour. But if you're the guy who's specialized and trained and you're operating the crane, you probably get paid a lot more, right? Because you're trained with more stuff. You have more knowledge. You have more ability. And so the pay differs, but how do we figure out a person's wages? If we know they get paid this much per hour, how do we figure out how much they end up getting paid? Jalen? If we know, for instance, you make $15 now. Let's just say you lived in Seattle, you're working at McDonald's, you got $15 an hour. How would we figure out how much money you make at the end of the day? By however many hours you work. Good. Just multiply however many hours you work times how much you get paid for every hour, and that gives you your money. Other people get paid a set amount. Every year, this is how much you're getting paid. And it doesn't matter if they work more hours, less hours, as long as the work is done, this is how much you're going to make. And the nice thing is it gives them some reliability, consistency in planning. Luciana, what's that called? Salary. Salary is a set amount of money. Usually people who get paid salary get paid once a month or twice a month. Obviously, you get paid once a month, we call that monthly. What if you get paid twice a month? Semi-monthly. There we go, semi-monthly. Some people say bi-monthly. That actually means every 2 months, technically. So semi-monthly, if you get paid twice a month. Occasionally you get paid weekly salary. That's not normal. Normally weekly pay is for people who are making hourly wage. There was another type of thing where people could get paid for every item they complete. We had in the example a dental hygienist, and every mouth she cleaned, she got paid a certain amount of money for every mouth. Maybe a barber gets paid for every head that they take care of. They take care of somebody's hair, they get paid a certain amount. I don't know. Factory workers used to get paid this way. What's that called? We don't see this much anymore, Michael.
Piecework wages.
Piecework wages. Piecework wages. We get paid a certain amount for every item that's completed. Now, when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, the money you have earned is not the money you get to keep. There's taxes, and there's union dues, and there's retirement plan contributions, and health insurance allocations. That are stuff taken out of your paycheck. Kind of gross. What do we call the money you earn and ought to be able to take home, Ben?
Gross pay.
Gross pay. What are all those things that seem to vanish from your gross pay? The stuff you don't get to keep because it goes somewhere else. Griffin? Deductions. And then the money you finally get to take home at the end of the day. Your actual pay you get to keep. What's that, Luciana? Net pay. And that's what we worked on yesterday, Bryson, as you were out. Let's take a look at the homework. Page 2 in your booklets. So have your books open to page 2 for me. Thank you. Excelente. Excelente. Yes. You weren't here. Good to have you back. Good. All right, let's take a look at these together. And the first several problems, we're just working with percents, just making sure we know how to work with these. Number 1, what'd you get for 16% of 584? Corey? 93.44. Number 2, 3.5% of 9,000, Luciana.
0.315.
I'm sorry?
0.315.
Oh, you know what? I think you hung the 3 zeros and forgot to put them back in. Because you moved the decimal 3 places, but that should have been the 3 zeros. So you should have had just 315. Does that make sense? Let's see, number 3, 106% of 42, Griffin.
48.52.
Not 48.52, Michael.
44.56.
Ooh, that's not what I have either, Jalen.
44.52.
I have 44.52, so if we combine y'all's answers, we've hit it right. 44.52, so just careful on your multiplication or addition there. Number 4, 12 is what percent of 40? Let's come back to Griffin for redemption.
30%.
30%. You make the fraction 12/40ths, reduce it down to 3/10, which becomes 30%. Number 5, 25 is 10% of what number? Back to Michael for redemption.
0.004.
No. Oh, the pain. Elaine.
25. 250.
250 is correct. So here, Michael, remember, if we say 25 is 10% of blank, we're going to divide by the 0.1, which means the 25 goes in the house, the 0.1's here. Well, if we go blank once, it becomes 250 divided by 1, which is obviously 250. So careful with that. I think you had the wrong number in the house there. Third tries the charm, Michael. 43 is what percent of 86?
50%.
50%. It's exactly half. Let's go to number 7. 10 years ago, Mr. Owens had a small cavity filled for $90. The cost to replace the filling is now $150. Find the percent of increase to the nearest whole percent. How do we find percent of change? Whether it's percent of increase or percent of decrease. Class?
Change over original.
So what's the change in the price here, Kirsten?
Number 7.
Number 7. What's the change in the price? Used to be you could get a cavity filled for 90. Now he gets it filled to $150.
70 or 7?
Oh, class?
40. Wait, what?
60.
Oh.
$60, right? From $90 going up to $150 is a change of $60. We have to put that over the original, Kirsten.
90.
$90. Now, the dollar signs are going to cancel, and the zeros are going to cancel, and 6/9 as a decimal.
2/3.
Well, we could reduce it to 2/3, but again, anything over
0.6.
9 is itself repeating, right? So 0.66666, it just keeps going. Then to make this into a percent, because it wanted the percent of change, remember, we just go class,
66.1.
and we get 66.6 repeating percent, or you can say 66.7% maybe if you wanted to round, or 66 2/3% would be pretty impressive also. How many had that percent of change? 66-ish%, whether, depending on how you rounded it. It didn't say how to round it there, I don't believe. All right. Oh, yes, it did. Nearest whole percent. Never mind. 67%. I can't read. 67% is what we wanted there. Okay, questions on percent of change. Joel, I think that's something we covered before you got with us. Percent of change, just have to memorize it's whatever the change is over the original. So maybe write that off to the side of in the book there. Change over original. Number 8, let's go back to Joel now, because this is what we talked about yesterday. Denise Davis earns $620 for working a 40-hour week. But if she were sick one week and could only work 18 hours, what would she earn? What do you think we needed to do here, Joel?
Divide 40 by 620.
Well, other way around. Divide 620 by 40, right? I think that's how you did it. Divide 620 by 40. This is how much she made for working 40 hours. So if I divide by 40, class, I get how much she makes each hour. I'm going to knock off the zeros to make my life easier. 4 goes into 6, class? Once with 2 leftovers. 4 goes into 22. 5 with 2 left over. And 4 goes into 20 5 times. So she's making $15.50 per hour. That had to be your first step. How many found $15.50 an hour? Does it make sense? We just have to divide the 40. Now, once we found $15.50 an hour, what do we do now, Joel?
Times it by 18.
Multiply that by 18, and what was your answer?
$279.
How many had $279? Excellent. You weren't here yesterday. Does that make sense? All right, questions from those who might have missed it. Questions. I will say this, the biggest thing I'm looking for on quizzes and tests, yes, I want right answers, but you'll get a lot of the partial credit if I see that you did the right steps. If you show me that you knew to divide by 40, even if you mess up the division, you show me you knew to multiply by 18, I'm more interested in that because in real life, you'd use a calculator for all this anyway. Okay, so I'm not necessarily going to allow you to use a calculator for everything, but as long as you show me you know the steps, you know what to do. That's the biggest thing I'm looking for. Obviously, right answers are good. Number 9, we have Bill working for a lawn service company in the summers. He's paid $30 for each lawn job that he helps to complete. So it's kind of like piecework and wages in a sense. Last week, he and his team completed 9 lawn jobs. Find his gross pay. Ben, what did we have to do here?
Multiply 30 times 9.
And we get?
$270.
$270 is correct. How many have that for his gross pay? Again, gross pay is what you actually earn. What you get to keep is the net pay. Number 6, Jillian works at a hair salon. She's paid $6 per hour from her employer plus tips. She works 6 hours on Tuesday and is tipped $24.50 by her customers. Find her gross pay. What do we have to do on this one? Tell you what, Bryson, I know you didn't do it because you weren't here, but let's talk through it. What do you think we need to do to find her gross pay? Divide what?
The per hour times.
Okay, now careful. We're not finding per hour. When you're finding per hour, you divide. If you are given the per hour, you multiply. So here we actually want to multiply what?
The per hour on.
So $6 per hour. That means every single hour she works, her employer pays her $6.
So
6 times 6 would be 36. She works 6 hours, $6 an hour. That's $36 in wages. What do I do with the tips? Add it on, because she's also getting the tips. She gets both, right? And so if I add that on, scribble that in there, what do we end up with? Walk me through this.
0, 5, 10, 6.
And how many had a gross pay of $60.50 that day? $60.50 that day. Notice if you work 6 hours, that's like making about $10 an hour, right? After the tips. So on the surface, $6 an hour, like, man, that's bad. But by the time you've collected the tips, you're making okay money, not great money. This isn't, money you're living off of necessarily if you've got a, family you're supporting, but, maybe for a college job or whatever. Number 11, though I do know hair salon people actually have to be like certified and stuff. There's all kinds of, a lot more complicated than I would have thought. It's not just cutting hair apparently. Number 11, Sam Davis receives an annual salary of $44,100 and is paid monthly. Each month, $328 is withheld. Find his monthly net pay. Now this we had to think about a little bit. What do we have to do first? Jalen? Kirsten, your hand was next.
Multiply 328 times 12.
You could actually do it that way. That's not the way I was thinking of doing it, but if he's paid $44,100, right, and that's his annual, and we know that every month you get 328 taken out, we could multiply the 328 by 12 to figure out how much total gets withheld. That will work, actually. If we do, we get 3,936. Okay, now what did you do with that number of deductions?
I subtracted it from 44,100.
Good, so this is how much he's supposed to be paid every year. But every year, this much gets withheld. So this actually gives us his annual net pay, doesn't it? And if we subtract, we get 40,164. Now, that's his annual net pay, but I asked what's his monthly net pay. So to finish it, Kirsten, by the way, class, this isn't the only way to do it, but Kirsten?
Times 12. Or divided by 12?
Which one?
Divided by 12.
This is how much in a year to all together, right? And if we're trying to find each little part, we got to divide the 12. So we'd end up dividing the 12, and that would give us our answer, which we'll get to in just a second. That's not the way I did it, but it's not wrong. That will give you the correct answer. Anyone do it a little bit differently? Michael, what did you do?
I think first I subtracted 44,100 from 328.
Well, not from 328. You can't take it from 328. 328 is smaller. You subtract 328 from 44,100. The problem is this is annual and that's monthly. So if you're going to start with a subtraction class, then you'd have to do as Kirsten did. Make sure it's annual gross, annual withholding, annual net pay. Keep it all in the annual together. What I did was I said this: if this is how much he's getting paid in a year, class, then to find out how much he gets paid in a month, I would need to divide by 12. If you know the big and you're finding the small, you got to divide. So I started with my division of 12, Kirsten. Not wrong for you to do it your way. I divided the 12 and I got 6. 90 would be 7, and 60 would be 5. Okay, so I got $3,675 per month that he earns. So I went from annual gross to monthly gross. Now, what would I have to do if I know monthly gross to get monthly net now, class? Now subtract the 328. And Michael, you can take 328. You can't take a monthly withholding from annual gross. but you do take monthly from monthly, right? So now I subtracted the 328, and that's where I got $3,347 monthly net pay. That's the same answer you'll get if you divide 12 into the 40,164, isn't it? So how many got to that point? 3,347. Joel did. Kirsten, maybe a little division error or something, perhaps. Questions on that? Questions on that? Do we understand the relationship between annual and monthly? Questions at all? All right, let's drop down to some more review here. Number 12, what'd you get for your answer, Ben?
11.
11. Number 13, Kirsten.
-10.
Negative 10. Number 14, Joel.
-7.
Negative 7. Number 15, Elaine.
7.
Positive 7. Good. Number 16, Jalen.
8.
Positive 8. Number 17, Michael.
-7.
Negative 7. Number 18, big long problem, Griffin.
0.
0. Number 19, what do we get? Corey.
-24.
Negative 24. Number 20, what do we get? Luciana.
+4.
Positive 4. Number 21, Bryson. Negative 30. Number 22, Ben.
Positive 16.
Oh, careful. We're multiplying. So you're right that negative times negative is positive. Make sure you multiply 7 times 9 equals
+63.
positive 63. Should have been our answer for 22. How about 23? Back to you, Ben.
-6.
Negative 6. And number 24, Joel.
+240.
Positive 240 is right. Positive because there's only 2 negatives. That's even. And you just multiply. I would say 2 times 5 is 10. 4 times 3, 12 times 2 is 24. 24 times 10, 240. How many got all of 12 through 24 right? All of 12 through 24 and all those signed number problems? Some good review for us there. All right, flip over to page 3. Turn over to page 3. I want you to do the review section without looking back. Do the review section without looking back. Other than maybe Bryson. Do a little review section, matching some terms without looking back.
How many hours do you work a week?
A week? Oh, goodness. I don't know. It's got to be close to 55 or 60. Yeah. That's why I'm salary. All right, let's take a look at this. Number 1, money that's paid for each hour a person works. Luciana? H, that's called wages. Number 2, money that's earned before deductions are removed. Griffin?
Gross pay.
C, gross pay. Number 3, a person who hires another person to work. Michael?
B,
B, the employer. The employer hires other people. And then number 4, money that's received for work or services. Money that's received for work or services. Kirsten?
D.
D, income. D, income. Just a very general term there. Number 5, money that's paid by a customer to show appreciation. Jalen? G, tips. We talked a little bit about tips way back. We talked about percents as well, by the way. You might remember that. Number 6, a set amount of money a person may receive each year. Corey? F, that's the salary. Number 7, a person who's hired to do work. What you got, Bryson?
Employee.
A, the employee. And number 8, money that is paid after deductions are made, or after deductions are taken out, might be a better way to phrase that. Elaine?
Net pay.
E, the net pay. Good. How many got all of those correct? And all your terms right? Keep up with terms, right? Make sure you're keeping up with those as we go through. Nice thing is today, there's only one term you need to know. And we're going to talk today about overtime. Overtime. Now, I told you in the last lesson that the federal government has decided that in the United States of America, a standard work week is how many hours, class? 40 hours. That's how much is standard. If you work more than 40, your employer, and you're on wages, not salary, if you're on wages, your employer has to pay you extra for working overtime. And the way generally overtime works here, look at this, over the 40-hour limit, overtime wages are usually, it's called time and a half. What that means is you're paid your usual rate, 1 times whatever your rate is, plus half more. And hold on just a second, I need to plug in this thing. Because it's about to die. Okay. All right, we're good now. All right, time and a half. So for instance, let's take a really easy problem. Let's suppose you get paid $8 an hour. Every hour you work, you get paid how much, class? $8. That's your normal pay. What would be half of 8, class? 4 more. So once you go over 40 hours, you get your 8 plus 4 extra, or in other words, class, you're now going to $12 per hour. So the first 40 hours are still the same rate. If you're working for $8 an hour, hours 1 through 40, $8 an hour. That doesn't change. But as soon as you go to the 41st hour, that hour gets paid $12. And the next hour, the next hour, the next hour, the next hour. So $8 an hour, that's not real great. $12 an hour is pretty respectable, right? What if you were making $20 an hour normally? Well, time and a half. Thus, what is the half? 10 more. So now you're up to what? 30 bucks an hour. I mean, that could really add up quickly, right? So overtime is something that if you're a wage employee, you want it, right? If you're willing to work hard, you want to go overtime because you want that extra money. I didn't get very many chances when I was in college to get our overtime because they guarded their overtime. They didn't want to pay overtime rate. So they try to make sure, nope, you're at your 40 hours, go home, get out of here. And but there were a couple times where they just needed the help. And it's like, we're just going to have to pay you the overtime. I'm like, yes. Because I was getting like $7.50 an hour, which wasn't much. But I'm like, yes, now I'm at 10s plus an hour. This is good. So I loved overtime. Let's take a look at problem number 1 here. Go and read that problem for us if you would, Bryson.
If Daniel Smith normal earns his 10 per hour, how much would he get paid for every overtime hour work?
At your seats, write it down. If he normally gets 10, once he starts working overtime, what's his overtime hourly wage? What you got, Bryson? 15. How many figured out it's $15 an hour? Okay, look at number 2. Read that one for us if you would, Luciana.
If Jennifer Davis earns $12 per hour, find her overtime rate.
All right, same thing. Normally 12, so if she's working overtime, what's that overtime rate? Luciana?
$18.
How many at $18 an hour? Figured out that half of 12 is 6. Now, look at number 3. Look at number 3. Bill Morris earns $14.50 per hour, and he worked 45 hours last week. Question number 1 says, find the amount he earned for the first 40 hours. Corey, how much does he get paid per hour for the first 40? It's right there in front of you, Corey. How much does he get paid for the first 40 hours? $14.50 an hour. That's his rate. So for the first 40, that's what he gets. Okay, the overtime doesn't kick in until after 40 hours. Does that make sense? So what do I need to do to figure out how much total money he earned for all of those first 40 hours put together? Corey?
Divided by 2.
Divide what? Divide by 2. Corey, think. $14.50 an hour, right? And he works 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 40 hours. What do I do to figure out how much money he's getting? There we go. Just multiply by 40. Set your seats. Take the $14.50 per hour. Multiply that by 40 hours. There's a few little shortcuts you could work in here by hanging zeros, for instance. But how much does he earn for the first 40 hours that he works? Corey going to give us his answer when he's got it? How many also had $580? If he stops after 40 hours, that's how much he's getting paid, right? But he didn't stop there, did he, class? He worked how many total hours?
45.
So how many of his hours were overtime hours, class?
5.
He has 5 overtime hours. So I'm going to have to multiply 5 times whatever his hourly rate is. Because his hourly rate for those 5 ain't $14.50 no more. He's getting paid time and a half. Now, here's the problem. Half of $14.50 for some of us might not be real easy to figure out, right? Maybe it is. Maybe you can think of it quickly. What do you do if it's a weird thing? Like cutting 10 in half to get 5 is easy. Cutting 12 in half to get 6 is easy. $14.50 cutting in half might not be as easy. So time and a half means you multiply by 1 and a half. Okay? So we multiply by 1 and a half, 1.5. At your seats, do that to get your answer for number 2, his overtime rate, meaning how much he's paid per hour. Take a moment to multiply that out. Now again, if you can think of half of $14.50 and tack it on, that would be quicker. But again, it won't always be super easy to figure that out. And Jalen, what do you have when you multiply the 1.5 by the 14.50?
2,100. No.
Put your decimal places back in there. 3 decimal places.
$21.75.
$21.75. How many got $21.75? Now, some of you might have said, I know half of this is $7.25. And if I add that, it's $21.75. If you can do that, great. But even if you can't, multiply by 1.5. That's your ticket. If you're like, cutting in half and all that is so confusing. Time and a half is 1.5. Make sense? Now, $21.75 is really good money. $14.50 is okay. $21.75 is fantastic. He works 5 overtime hours, right? So now, number 3, how much did he earn just for those 5 overtime hours? Find that answer now. Part number 3. I got some speed demons who got it already. We'll go to speed demon Michael for our answer.
$108.75.
Good. How many also got $108.75? All right, now, the last part, number 4, says find his total gross pay for the week. What do I have to do, Griffin, to figure out his total gross pay?
Add the 580 to the 108.
Good. Get his regular wages and his overtime wages and just add them together. And so that's going to give us what for our answer, Griffin?
$688.75.
$688.75. Do you see how I took a problem and I broke it into 4 parts? How much for the regular 40 hours? What should he be paid for each overtime hour? Okay, now how much is that total for his overtime work? How much is his total pay? We're going to do that on number 4. Read number 4 for us if you would, Ben.
Chad Marley earns $8.40 per hour for a 40-hour week. Last week, she worked 54 hours. Find his gross pay.
All right. First thing we need to do is figure out how much he gets paid, class, for the first 40. Thank you, Kirsten. Class, start by finding how much he gets paid for the first 40. The regular 40-hour week. Figure that out at your seats very quickly. Again, hang zeros, make your life easier. A few people already have that first part. And Elaine was the first hand I saw. Elaine, how much did he get for the first 40 hours?
$336.
$336. That's 840 times 40, right? Any questions on the first answer? Now we got to figure out how much he gets paid for the overtime hours. Again, overtime, class, is time and a half. That means we multiply by 1.5. What do we multiply by 1.5?
$8.40.
His $8.40, right? It's not a lot, but we're going to multiply that by 1.5. What's his overtime rate? $8.40 an hour, normal. But when he goes overtime, he getting more than that. he's getting what? When I multiply the 1.5, Kirsten?
$12.60.
How many at 12.60 once he goes overtime? 12.60. When you multiply by 1.5, there's been 12.60. Now, how many hours of overtime did he work, though? Let's go back to Ben. It says he worked how many hours total?
54.
54. Remember, class, the first 40 hours are regular. But how many more hours? How far did he go over 40, Ben?
14.
14 hours. So that's what I multiply by his overtime rate. Does everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to multiply his 14 extra hours that he did. That gets multiplied by the time and a half rate, the 1.5 rate, or $12.60. So now, find out how much he earned for the last 14 hours he worked that week. Got it?
Yeah.
What you got?
$453.60.
Did you multiply 14 times 1260?
I got confused at first.
Well, multiply 14 times 1260. And we'll get something there. Let's see. Corey, coming over to you.
$176.40.
$176.40. How many had that for his overtime wages? That's how many got paid for the overtime. Again, first 40 hours, that's $8.40 an hour. That's what it said in the problem. The next 14 hours, we had to do a little multiplication, time and a half, 1.5, $12.60 an hour. That gave him $176.40. So when it says find his total gross pay, what do I have to do, class? Add them together. Add his overtime pay plus his regular pay. And what do we get for our final answer here, Jalen?
$512.40.
$512.40. Questions on that process? Do you understand how to think it through? Go down to number 5. Number 5. Isaiah Rose earned $7.50 an hour. 1 week last summer, some of his coworkers were sick, so he worked 48 hours that week. How much did he earn? Go through the whole process now. Start with the first 40, then figure out what his overtime rate is, figure out how much he got paid for his overtime hours, and add it all together. Use number 3 as a guide. Number 3 walks you through the steps. It will help to have extra paper. You're kind of cramming into a tiny little space. It's going to be hard. But you're off to a good start. And extra paper really helps. There's not a lot of room to work in the supplement, so mainly use the spare paper to do your work. How many overtime hours did he work, class? 8, right? 48 total, but how many overtime hours, class? 8, because that's how many over 40. And let's see here, we got, how many got for the first 40 hours? $300. First 40 hours, $300. How many figured out that his overtime pay rate is $11.25? You multiply by 1.5. That's what we have to do for the second step. Multiply by 1.5 to see how much each of his 8 overtime hours gets paid. He didn't get $7.50 no mo. He's getting $11.25. We multiply that by 8. How many got $90 of overtime pay? So, 300 for regular pay, 990 for overtime pay. Class gave him $390. Look at number 6. Josh Hawkins earning $8.25 an hour as a cashier and dining room attendant. He did so well at his job, he was promoted to crew captain, and he earns $12 an hour now. Still works 30 hours a week. How much more will Josh earn per week? This doesn't say anything about overtime, does it, class? No. It just has an idea of a pay raise. And that happens sometimes, right? Your hourly rate sometimes changes, not because you're doing overtime. You're just promoted. You're doing a great job. They recognize it. You get promoted. So he apparently, class, had been working how many hours a week?
30.
He had been working 30 because it says he still works 30. So apparently he was working 30 to begin with, and he was getting paid how much just to be an attendant, a dining room attendant, cashier?
$8.25.
All right, at your seats, figure out how much he was making at his little bit lower station. And this is where you'll probably start out when you start working, part-time job later on. Wow, we got some speed demons here. Wow. What do we get, Luciana? All right, he was earning $247.50 a week. Does everyone understand how we did that? Even if you didn't have time to finish, we understand what we did. But he got promoted. And when he got promoted, he's not making $8.25 anymore, class. It says he's now making $12. But he's still working 30 hours. We can all do this in our head. How much is he now earning per week, class? $360, right? Because 3 times 12 is 36. Stick a 0 on the backside, $360. He's making a lot more now than he was before, right? We don't have time to do it just because time's running out on us. But number 7 asks this. Oh, sorry. How much more? We didn't ever answer the question. How much more is he making now? What do I have to do to find how much more he's now making? Subtract. 360 minus 247.50. She's already got it, so just tell us what it is.
$12.50.
$112.50. Again, as long as you know to subtract, good. Okay, $112.50. Now, number 7, this is the one I say we don't really have time to work it, but it asks, what's the percent of increase? What was the percent of raise? That's what it's called when your pay goes up. What's the percent of raise he received with his promotion? Well, how do we find percent of increase, class? Now, you can either do this with these big, scary numbers, or you can do it with the little numbers, right? How big was his raise going from $8.25 to $12? $3.75. His raise, his change is $3.75 over original.
$8.25.
$8.25. That's what he was getting. So change over original. We would divide that out, and we get our answer. It's 45.45 repeating percent. We don't care about that as long as you know how to do it. Number 8 says, now that Josh makes $12 an hour, what would be his overtime pay rate? What you got, Joel? He's $12 an hour. He's only working 30 hours. But if he were to work overtime, what would his overtime pay rate be? What do I do to find it?
Add 1/2 rate.
Right, which is
18.
18. There we go. We're multiplied by 1.5. But it's quicker on this one just to add the 6. How many are thinking $18 an hour? $18 an hour. So number 9 class, and we'll just stay with me here. Number 9, if Josh worked 44 hours one week, what would be his gross pay? Well, this is after the promotion, so the first 40 hours class, he's making
$12.
$12. Well, I think we can do this in our head. 40 times 12. Anybody?
480.
480, right? 4 times 12 is 48. Slap a 0 on the back. But how many overtime hours?
4.
4, because he worked 44 hours. Now, the overtime rate, Joel just told us, class, he's getting 18 an hour. So how much is that? We can't do that in our head. Maybe we can.
72.
Got some people who got it, 72. So what would be his gross pay then for working 44 hours?
$552.
$552. Real quick, just looking at the last one. This is kind of interesting. In some employments, in some vocations, police officers, I know this is the case, when they work overtime or work on holidays, instead of getting time and a half, they'll actually get what's called double time or double pay, which means if we normally get paid this much, you're getting paid twice as much. That's the case with Mr. Howard. It says he earns $13.50 an hour, and he worked 40 hours last week, but 8 of the hours were on a holiday. His employer pays double time for holidays. Okay, 40 hours, but if 8 of them were holiday pay, class, how many hours were regular pay?
32.
Does everyone understand that? Okay, even though he didn't go over 40, since he worked 8 hours on a holiday, he's getting paid holiday pay for that. So 32 hours, he's getting paid how much, class?
$13.50.
$13.50. But those 8 other hours, he's getting paid double time for this particular guy. What's double time if you're normally $13.50? 27 even. And we would multiply these two things and add them together to get his earnings or his gross pay. All right. Homework for this evening is to do page 4, numbers 1 through 10. Page 4, numbers 1 through 10. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and you are dismissed.